Hi, this is Daniela Cambone, and welcome back to the Daniela Cambone Show here on ITM Trading, coming to you from the heart of New York City in Times Square, joined by my guest today, who says a 1930s, 1970s U.S. situation could be brewing today because there are 5 things happening right now that we haven't seen since the 1930s, the 1970s, and the 1990s in Japan. Is that
That's
a pretty
right.
good summary? Well, Joe
Yes,
Litman
exactly.
of Altimetry, welcome back to
Thank you,
the
Danny.
show.
Great to see you.
Good to see you. Always good to be with you. And I was excited because you reached out to me and said,
For the first time in my life, I might actually say gold is a good investment.
We have a convert today.
Long-term gold is a good investment.
We have a convert.
Hey,
We're
look,
going to get to that. We're going to get to that.
Gold has been a great trade many, many times, but it's never been a better investment than the S&P 500 with dividends fully invested over any long period of time. This is the first time I'd say that you have the things happening that you might actually say, no, it could be that gold outperforms S&P even with dividends reinvested over a longer period of time. If certain things happen that are being talked about right now that I'd be really worried about.
All right. Well, let's take a step back
Yes.
before we get to the gold part, because like I said, I was super curious to know how you've come to this change of heart. But tell us what you're seeing, these 5 things that you're seeing in the economy right now that have you waving the red flag that, hey, we could be heading back into a 1930s, 1970s situation here.
They're the 5 policies that Kamala Harris has been talking about pushing through, which I don't believe she'll get through if you have a gridlocked or call it a purple Congress. But if she's a very, very blue Congress and she has the right spirit behind, and if she is able to win the election, she's been talking about pushing through 5 things that Obama talked about doing, but didn't have the, I guess, political will to be able to do it, didn't have the political backing. Biden talked about in 2020, and I'd say some of the stuff Kamala's talking about is even more aggressive than that. And those 5 things are raising personal income taxes, raising capital gains and dividends taxes, raising corporate income taxes, taxing unrealized gains, and finally price controls. And that's exactly what you saw in the 1930s. By the way, those things were not in place in 1929. In 1929, you had the market crash. There was bad unemployment. Unemployment was already down to something like 6%. And then the politicians put these things through, right? These price controls and raising income taxes, everything else. And then you had the 1930s. It's to say that the 1930s is brought about by a stock market crash by itself is just silly. It's not what really happened. Okay. In fact, the market was already fixing itself, but then because of that spirit of, oh no, let's blame what happened, everything else, they were able to put through in 1931, 32, 33, all kinds of policies that made that decade atrocious. I mean, horrible. And when you look at the 1970s, and again, this is not like a blue versus red issue. I mean, the price controls of the 1970s that began were put through by Nixon, all right? So it's not like it's just blue or red. Is there bad policy for the economy and the stock markets? And bad policy is what we had in the 1970s, like the 1930s, increasing personal income tax rates that went way above 50, 60, 70%, above those levels, increased capital gains and dividends taxed at the marginal rate, meaning they were also at 50, 60, 70%. We didn't have the crazy talk of taxing unrealized gains, but honestly, even that one doesn't have to happen for the market, for all these other things to be. If you try to tax unrealized gains, it would be a disaster for the economy, for the market, complete disaster, and wholly unimplementable. I mean, if you want to give my profession, the CPA profession, triple their hours, put in taxing unrealized gains. You will create so much work for accountants, it's ridiculous.
So, okay, so two main points I want to bring up. So what do you say to folks who say, well, if you compare the economic plans of Harris versus Trump, that they're actually quite similar?
On some issues, they're similar. So here's the way to think about it. On what the Biden-Harris administration has done over the last 4 years, to include increasing tariffs on China specifically, to include, frankly, keeping taxes. I mean, they did get some tax increase through, but nothing like Kamala's talking about with this.
Right.
Nothing like Biden talked about doing in 2020. Nothing like Obama talked about doing at the time and just didn't have the will. So I'm hoping this isn't going to happen, but if it does happen, so if Kamala wins, that's step 1. If you see it's a very blue Congress, that's step 2. Then if you start seeing these policies getting passed, even without the taxing unrealized gains, just raising capital gains tax or raising dividends tax will kill the stock market for a good couple of years, if not longer, 2 to 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
And at which point I'll be there saying, oh, for goodness sake, buy gold. Gold will outperform, right? However, if that doesn't happen, I want to say, by the way, it's also if Trump wins with a very red Congress. Some of the protectionist policies that he's talked about, and some, I'll say,
tariff.
super right-wing conservatives have talked about 100% or more tariffs in that on all kinds of things, right? And very protectionist is bad. The 100% tariff on EVs is not a bad thing. And the reason is because that only gets the cost of the car, the price, back to market, right? The Chinese government is subsidizing. Best Buy crushed all these record stores, if you remember, 20, 30 years ago, because they were selling records and CDs and cassettes for less than the cost. That's called predatory pricing. So it's right to stop that. And what China's doing with EVs right now is predatory pricing. They're pricing below the cost to make the car so they can kill all the other car makers, and then they can raise the prices again. So that tariff makes sense. But when they start talking about widespread, overly America, and they start talking about overly protectionist policies, that's actually bad for America and for the economy and for the stock market.
I want to get back to that point and the dollar, but if we could just look at how gold performed during, the other decades that you cited, the 30s, the 70s, vis-a-vis the stock market. Give us a crash course here.
Versus the currency, of course, gold always does better than currency. So it's not a question of did gold do better than yen in the 1990s? Of course, right? Gold's doing better than yen now, right? With yen going to 150 per dollar or whatever, 160 per dollar. Does gold do better than currency in the 1970s? Of course, the 1930s. But when the stock market falls and collapses the way it does, right, during those times, because when you tax alcohol heavily, you get less alcohol sales. When you tax cigarettes heavily, you get less cigarette sales. Why do we believe that if you tax stocks through dividends and capital gains, you're not going to have gold outperform? Of course, gold outperformed during those periods.
What I'm hearing from you then, Joel, is whether there's a Harris or a Trump win, the stock market is at risk here.
Whether Harris or Trump win with a mandate that's super left or super right, the stock market and the economy are at risk.
But isn't that where we're headed?
Well,
doesn't that look like what
of course
that's playing out?
Of course it scares me either way.
Okay.
But what has happened in the past, what happened to Obama, what happened to Biden, what happened to other Republican presidents is if you come in and you end up with a gridlocked, a purple Congress, House and Senate split, what have you, the likelihood of I'll say, crazier policies getting through are lower. And so honestly, Trump with a purple Congress and the stock market's going to take off like you have no idea. Right? He's talking about dropping capital gains tax rates further. He's talking about dropping personal tax rates. He's talking about making sure corporate tax rates don't go back up, and if that even fall even further, which they should. Americans are grossly overtaxed. And so if you bring those down, the economy will boom and you will increase tax revenue from a lower tax rate. And that'll be very, very good for the economy and the stock market. If that happens, but that's an if. And are you saying, do I know? How can I possibly know? Right? No, but anybody that says they know who's going to win the election is just crazy.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
No one knows. But we can put it in these quadrants, right? Trump with a red Congress, Trump with a purple. And we have a good idea of what policies will go through. And Kamala with the red or Kamala with the purple Congress. And we have no. The biggest scare is Kamala with the blue Congress. Then I will be out there saying, I'll be screaming, buy gold.
I'm going to get you.
I'll be telling people to sell
t-shirt.
stocks. Yeah.
Buy gold. Danny's been telling me for the longest time.
In that situation.
Okay.
In that situation, and pretty much only that.
But let's talk about what we do know.
Yeah.
The Fed cuts, right?
Yes.
Were you surprised that they do the right thing?
Are they doing the right thing? How do I say this? I can only quote Thomas Sowell, right? And it was probably one of my favorite economists ever. And are they doing the right thing? Well, at least they're pulling back on having done the wrong thing, right? Raising rates so far, so fast at that level, right? Which has caused trouble for banks and everything else. And has helped create whatever rolling recession. We may not have a technical recession, but the problem is a recession is measured based on GDP, which includes government spending. So pump up government spending, ta-da, no recession, right? When you think of so is there a recession without government spending?
Pump up more government spending, and now where are we at with that debt?
Yes, well, even right now, the U.S. doesn't have a debt issue. That's just no. That's people who don't understand how to do credit analysis. To say the U.S. has a debt issue right now can only be stated if you haven't done credit analysis on the U.S. government's tax revenue, on their ability to pay the debts and what have you. Is it a lot? Yes. Is it too much? No. Which is why the Fed still sells out its Treasury auctions. Which is why the Fed still to this point. Danny, I'm not saying the dollar is going to outperform gold. I'm not saying that. But I am saying the idea that the U.S. is going to have a national debt crisis right now or in the foreseeable future, even with the deficits that are being talked about, is actually quite low.
I know we have had separate debates on this, but is the way out of that debt crisis more taxation and just shutting off the valve on spending, or you just default on your debt, which could you imagine?
No, the way out is lowering tax rates in the right places that spur the economy so much, which is what happened. Just to rehash, Trump took the 39.5%, 37% tax rate in the United States in 2018, which was the highest corporate tax rate on the planet, except for the country of Comoros, which I don't know if I'm pronouncing correctly, right? And if you happen to do oil and gas in Dubai. So other than that, you had the highest corporate tax rate. And so what did Trump do? He lowers it to 21, 23 something percent. And what happened? Well, that year, yes, the tax rate resulted in less federal taxes from corporations. But 3 years later, 4 years later, the companies actually did reinvest a lot of that money. It did result in bigger companies in the US with more revenue and more earnings. And now the US is collecting far more from corporate taxes, far more, like double than they were in 2018 or 2017 on a lower tax rate. So if you lower the tax rate in the right places at the right times, and they do that, you will have increased tax revenue. That's the Laffer curve. The man should have won the Nobel Prize. He hasn't because it's such a political hot topic. But the Laffer curve and Art Laffer, Professor Laffer, who's still alive, should have won the Nobel Prize in this. And Trump followed it. He gave him the Presidential Medal of Honor at least, even if it's not going to win the Nobel Prize. And he said, I'm going to follow the Laffer curve because we are at the highest tax rates. So if you're able to reduce tax rates in the right places in the right time, which Trump is talking about, right? And you put those through, you will have an increase in corporate earnings. The stock market will take off.
On the dollar topic, because you mentioned tariffs,
yes.
What do you make of Trump wanting to really penalize nations that turn away from the dollar? I'm talking about 100% tariffs on those countries that turn away from the dollar, trying to stop this whole de-dollarization process, which we're already seeing countries doing bilateral agreements outside of the U.S. dollar, Joel.
But that doesn't result in de-dollarization, has it? Has it?
Not yet.
No, but that's the point. In fact, it's going the other direction. So let's see, a year ago, 2 years ago, how much trade was being done? 3 years ago, how much trade was being done in U.S. dollars? 8% of global trade. How much today? Daniel DiMartino Butch, she said something like 13%, 14%.
Yeah.
That's almost, I'm not saying it's double, but man, that's a lot more. So to say that the world is de-dollarizing, right? I'm not saying parts of the world aren't trying to de-dollarize. I'm saying they will fail, right? They will fail. What, Russia? With the ruble collapsing every day, literally collapsing on a daily basis, and the massive mess they've gotten themselves in. Ruble, Brazil real.
It's a different currency together. You know the BRICS are working.
And what will you do with the BRICS currency, this famous currency, whether it's yen-based or just this BRICS crypto when that comes about? What will they do with it? They'll say, well, I need to invest it. Of course, were they going to let it sit in crypto doing nothing? That's like sitting in a currency. So what are they going to do with it? They're going to say, well, I should buy some stocks. 60% or more of the U.S. stock of the world is the U.S. stock market. U.S. stocks pay more in capital gains and more dividends than the rest of the world combined. U.S. bonds pay more interest than any other region of the world combined. U.S. treasuries pay more in interest than any other sovereign or region of sovereigns combined. So the issue is, once some country says, we're going all full on Bitcoin or full on BRICS crypto, what do they do the next day? They put it in dollars. If they want aerospace and defense, they got to go to the U.S. If they want gas, they got to go to the U.S. If they want oil, the U.S. is the number one exporter of oil in the world. So the petrodollars are naturally going to be more dollars than something else because the U.S. is the top exporter of oil and gas and aerospace and defense and wheat. I mean, wheat is the number one calorie eaten in the world. So obviously, right, the world is not dollarizing. It's already, not de-dollarizing. It's already dollarizing. And for that reason, Trump should not do anything with tariffs or protectionist policies overly punishing countries, because it's happening anyway, right? It has to. If you want to be part of the global stage, you have to be part of the U.S. dollar, period.
Joel Litman on AI. Sam Altman just said wars will be fought over AI unless there's a massive spending in infrastructure. Your thoughts on the whole AI game? Does it have legs?
Yeah, I think the AI is so powerful, and thankfully the U.S. has the lead by far, right? The fact is, AI and the use of AI comes from entrepreneurship, and the world is a global leader in entrepreneurship by multiples, right? Venture capital in the United States is 2 to 3 times the rest of the world combined, right? Angel investing in the United States is 5 to 10 times or more the rest of the world combined. right? And so thankfully, all that entrepreneurship is happening in the United States because it is the best place to be an entrepreneur because you have free speech, you have rights to protection of your assets and whatever else. I know the gold people say they don't, but relative to other countries, you have more rights in the United States than you have in most other countries, feasibly, right? To then be an entrepreneur and build stuff. So I think the U.S. can maintain a lead there. Now, China, has proven that they will do anything to steal all the IP they can possibly steal from anyone and everyone with no recourse whatsoever. And so you have to do something to stop them from stealing that IP, right, and just taking it. They're trying to build it on their own, but you can't have an entrepreneurial culture when you don't have a First Amendment or a Second, Third, Fourth, Fifth, 10th Amendments. I mean, without the Bill of Rights and Constitution, it's very hard to be an entrepreneur. And that's what the U.S. has as an advantage. So I'm very hopeful the U.S. will still do very well, but they do have to protect that IP, which China has proven they will not. And it really is a U.S. versus China issue.
We started by talking, obviously, gold. So let's just wrap with that because as we're speaking, it's above $2,600 an ounce. Gold. Joel Litman finally has said he's starting to like gold.
I found a scenario where I would like gold more than stocks. Should that scenario materialize?
I'm still going to take it
in the next 4 months.
Okay, and many banks have now turned bullish. Gold, Bank of America, ING saying this rally's just getting started. Talk of.
Are you talking about the sell-side research analysts at these Wall Street firms?
$3,000 gold.
No, their calls are nonsense.
Okay.
Come on, Wall Street analysts are so bad in the recommendations. I mean, I wouldn't exist if Wall Street was good in their business. My company wouldn't exist if Wall Street had good recommendations on any of these calls.
Would you be surprised if gold were to hit 3,000? Look at this rally. What's fueling it?
I wouldn't be surprised if gold does well. I'd be surprised if it outperforms in the next 5-10 years the stock market if we don't have these certain policies go through. I just feel that there's a chance. And so we have to. The thing is, you don't have to bet against this issue. You don't have to make your gold bet now that it's going to beat the S&P until you see the policies come through, and that'll take months. First, you got to see the election. Then you got to see what happens to Congress. Then you have to see the first 100 days and see what they get passed. So between now and the end of the first 100 days of the election, of the new president, then you can make a decision as to what. So we have time. Yeah. But is it a real issue to be concerned about? Yes. But that's the only case.
What's something you just like folks to hear? Because, I get so many emails a day, people so afraid. I mean, look, we're in Times Square. I mean, you see what's outside, Joel. Yeah. It's not a pretty picture, right? With the homelessness and what's happening out there. I mean, people are really afraid for their kids' future, their grandkids' future. I mean, what do you...
I know. I think the fear is justified in many cases. It's certainly justified. You live in a number of the cities that have been totally mismanaged, right? I mean, there's the cities that have mismanaged, and you can talk about which ones are: Memphis, New Orleans, to some extent New York, Chicago, San Francisco, right? Seattle. I would be worried walking around. I wouldn't want my kids walking around. But if you literally take out, I don't know, the top 6 cities for murder and the top 6 cities for crime and the top 6 cities for home invasion, the United States isn't that bad, actually.
So leave the urban areas, basically.
Well, not all of them, but the urban areas that are run by moronic, mayors and aldermen and councilmen that seem to not understand, that defunding the police is a bad thing, right? Or that having less rule of law or order is a bad thing. So stick with the cities where you don't have these, these crazy, mayors and the crazy whatever, and I think you're all right. But yes, there is some fear, but I think the fear is brought up by social media and the algorithms creating it. And at the end of the day, the U.S. is still the right place to be. It is still the right economy to be, outside of that one scenario that I'm concerned about, which is if Kamala wins and she pushes the policies she is stating she wants to put through with Congress behind her, right? 3 months from 6 months now, I'll be on the show screaming, buy gold, sell stocks, sell VOO,
I'm going to buy you that
sell
t-shirt.
the S&P.
I'm going to get you that t-shirt, one for you, your wife, your beautiful family, everyone. Joel, let's talk just some lighter stuff now. Well, not lighter. You're in town.
Yes.
I'm taking part at your. Can we talk about your conference?
Yeah, we have a conference tomorrow.
Table.
Yeah, so it's a round table. It's called it's a round table. It's just a bunch of. We don't pay for speakers. You know that, right? Nobody gets paid as a speaker.
But you get the brightest minds.
Right? And we just get people that want to get together in a roundtable format. It's so fun.
Good.
Yeah, it's a so fun thing. Yeah.
And if people want to read more about you and your writings and your content, talk to me about Altimetry.
I'll offer them altimetertrial.com. So we have this altimeter, and that altimeter is our flagship kind of product. That gets you our database of 6,000 companies, all in uniform accounting. Again, we don't trust Wall Street analysis. Nobody should trust Wall Street, analysts or their research ever. Their industry analysis is kind of good, but their stock picks are atrocious, right? So stock picks, macro picks, everything else is just terrible. By the way, Wall Street has flip-flopped on where the S&P 500 is going to be. For the last 9 months, over and over again to say, here's what they say today. I'm like, okay, clocks are right. Broken clocks are right twice a day also. So, no, I'd say altimetertrial.com. We'll put the
All right,
we'll
we'll
put this
fire
at the
it in.
bottom.
We'll fire it in.
Right, and at altimetertrial.com, I'll give you viewers a special deal getting in, and they get 30-day trial. You get our macro, so everything I've been talking about macro, you can see there in our concerns. But you also get access to all of our 6,000 company analysis, which is more than all of the bulge bracket combined in terms of U.S. research.
Yeah.
Right, nobody covers 6,000 companies, so it's a good thing.
You do really, really good work. I may not agree with you and see eye to eye on some topics, but I have to say you've always done outstanding work. So
Can I say something rude? Yes?
go for it.
So you're saying
Yeah.
since you've had me on in the last 2 years, right, and we've been on, and I've made a call that the stock market's going to do very, very well and pay really good dividends, that hasn't happened?
And I could say, since you've been on, look at the rally that gold's had. Imagine had I listened to you 4 years ago.
Well, I didn't say buy gold and I didn't sell gold and buy dollars.
Right,
I was
right.
saying sell gold and buy the
Well,
S&P.
that's why I say we
Yes.
speak the same language.
That's great.
All right.
I know I'm going to anger your audience. Sorry. Please be nice to me in the comments. And if you're
No,
not,
we like having differing viewpoints. It makes for a good discussion. It's healthy for everyone. Joel Litman.
Thank you, Danny.
Altimetry. Thank you so much. Good to see you. And thank you for watching. We'll have more great content coming your way. So be sure to stay tuned to the Daniela Cambone Show here on ITM Trading. Don't forget to sign up at danielacambone.com and subscribe to our channel. We'll see you soon.